Live from ZTN studios in Harare, Zimbabwe. Welcome to our virtual discussion this afternoon. ZIMCODD Public Finance Management Reform in Daba. National roads declared a national disaster. Where is the money to fix them? This program is brought to you by Zimpaper's TV network ZTN in partnership with the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, ZIMCODD. Good afternoon. I'm your host, Andy Hodges. Now, please feel free to share your comments and views via our Facebook page, Zimpaper's TV network, or via our Twitter handle, at ZTN News.
The Zimbabwean government has resolved that all roads in the country be declared a state of disaster in order to facilitate the release of funds for maintenance and repair works. The government was advised that effects of heavy and incessant rains that are being witnessed across Zimbabwe have badly affected the country's road infrastructure. 31% of Zimbabwe's total budget, equivalent to 131.6 billion Zimbabwe dollars or 1.6 billion US dollars, which is 5.5% of Zimbabwe's GDP, is allocated toward infrastructural development. The African Union AU declaration stipulates that African governments must spend 9.6% of their gross domestic product GDP on infrastructure to keep pace with the demands from population and economic growth. Should the government have declared Zimbabwe's roads a national disaster? Why are they in the state of neglect and disrepair that they are in now? Where will the money be found to repair and rehabilitate them? Does Zimbabwe need to change its transportation policies?
To discuss ZIMCODD Public Finance Management Reform in Daba, national roads declared a national disaster. Where is the money to fix them? We are joined virtually this afternoon by Lee Mutakede. He's Secretary General of the Urban Councils Association of Zimbabwe and Zimbabwe Local Government Association. Frederick Maguraminga, he's Zimbabwe Union of Drivers and Conductors ZUDAC President, and Vince Musewe, an independent economist. We were expected to be joined by Zimbabwe's Minister of Transport and Infrastructure Development, Honorable Felix Mona. Unfortunately, he was unable to make it this afternoon. However, we will endeavor in future programmings to get his comment on this vital topic for all Zimbabweans. Welcome to the program, gentlemen. Lee, let me start with you. There are roughly 88,100 kilometers of classified roads in Zimbabwe. 9,500 kilometers are bitumen surface, state highways and urban roads, while most rural roads are unpaved or dust roads. Why do you think that the government declared national roads a disaster? And why now, when, quite frankly, the roads have been in a sorry state for a number of years?
Thank you, Andy, and good morning, Zimbabwe. And thank you for having me on your program. Maybe starting point would be to just maybe add to your statistic that maybe the figures you are giving us is for 1999. In 2017, we had a road condition survey that revealed that now we have a total of over 98,000 kilometers of roads, of which of all those we have 26% that are under the District Development Fund. We also have 19% that are under the Department of Roads. And rural district councils, they account for 41%. Urban councils, they account for 12%, while about 3% are unaccounted for. They were not owner classified. So that's the state of roads in terms of the amount of roads that Zimbabwe has at the moment. And coming to your question now on the state of disaster, I think the state of disaster, when the government declares that it is to facilitate for the financing of repairing of roads. And the reason why I think that one has come by is because of the incessant rains that have pounded on in our country. Well, a very good and welcome also development in terms of our agriculture, but also it has affected our roads in a very big way. both in the urban and in the rural areas. And to us as local governments, it reflects a national government, a state that is responsive to what is happening to our roads. And as such, as you can see, and the state of disaster is also coming upon another disaster, which is the COVID-19. And it is a reflection of what government, the national government has to do, and also the responsiveness of national government after realizing that local government alone cannot take care of our roads in their current state.
So Lee, I mean, there's huge negative impacts on having such a bad or poor road infrastructure, and particularly on human development, commerce, tourism, and trade in particular. In fact, most roads in the country are pretty much impassable, particularly in the rural areas. So I want to ask you this, though, because what are the current policies in place? Because if you look at the state of Zimbabwe's roads, it would appear that possibly those policies are not working. But can they, however, inform policy solutions going forward?
Yes, we do have policies in place for our roads, like you have just mentioned in the opening video there, that our government has set aside 31% of the total budget to infrastructure, including roads. And if you look at it, it is way above the AU benchmark of 9.5%. And for us, I think we can say that we do have a policy in place through our budget, because our budget is the one that speaks to our priority as a country, and it speaks to our priorities also in terms of how we value infrastructure.
You know, your members use Zimbabwe's road infrastructure on a daily basis. So how bad is it actually out there? And in your opinion, what caused this? Who is to blame for the state of Zimbabwe's roads today?
Andy, I'm not here to.
Oh, sorry, no. This is for Frederick. Sorry, Lee. This is for Frederick.
Oh, yes.
It's for Frederick, Lee. It's a question for Frederick.
Oh, okay.
Frederick, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much, and I thank you for actually putting us on board in this very important discussion. Yes, I want to start by actually greeting the nation of Zimbabwe, who are the traveling people who use the roads. It's very important that we cannot, yes, blaming for construction, constructive criticism is accepted. Yes, our members right now are actually driving in roads which are not even suitable for driving. So it's a very, very important decision that was taken by the government to declare it a state of disaster. Our roads are actually off roads, all of them. We've got 80% of roads which are actually off roads, which meaning to say dust roads. And we've got 20% of our roads are actually being tarred. And these are tarred roads, they've got potholes, they've got so many issues, they are actually damaged. So in terms of actually blaming, yes, we cannot say blaming as such, but obviously the public will always say we blame the responsible authorities. We have got Zinara. It's a matter of collecting the funds and making sure that those funds are actually articulated in such a way that actually disbursed in such a way that they address the problem is affected by motorists, is affected by the nation of Zimbabwe with regards to roads. It's a matter of actually having the councils putting their houses in order, stopping the wars that are existing between the local government and the local authorities. We must see them to actually have, they have to coexist to make sure that the nation benefits. We are where we are because we have actually failed to have a coherent system of managing roads, a coherent system of coming up with master plans which include road construction. As I'm speaking right now, I think we are aware that we have got a master plan that since existed up to, which was supposed to have been abandoned up to 1993. But up to now, we are still having that master plan. So you see, we have got a combination of issues where we say we need political will, where we need the corruption to be actually eliminated from our authorities, such that they focus on national issues, because road carnage has actually claimed a lot of people as a result of these bad roads. Because as drivers, we say, and even transport operators, we say safer roads for safer vehicles, for safer public. But right now, as I'm speaking, we can also say, yes, we blame also, the issue of natural disasters. We had Cyclone Idai, we have seen roads being swept away, damaged, bridges being damaged. We have also seen the budgets that are being actually given, budget allocation for roads itself. We've also seen not being adequate, because we are not talking about a situation that existed today or 10 years ago, but something that has existed maybe starting from 1985. Right. 1985, where we were supposed to have started actually maintaining and rehabilitating.
Okay, so Frederick, I want to bring Vince in here. Vince, you know, the Zimbabwe National Road Administration ZINARA mandate, they say, is not to fix the roads, but to collect and distribute funds to road authorities. They state, and I quote, that the road authorities are the ones responsible for all the roadworks. So your comment, why do you think we find ourselves in this situation as regards the state of Zimbabwe's road infrastructure?
Andy, that's me now. Hey.
Yes, Vince, please go ahead.
Yeah, Andy, you know, I think my colleagues are being shy to actually, you know, analyze this situation and see where it comes from. There was a huge report that was done by the World Bank way back, about in 2010, where they actually, you know, articulated particularly the issues are in order for us to be able to actually spend, you know, develop our infrastructure. And some of those things have been ignored. For example, I can give you a major issue, which I would like to talk about, is the issue of the NRZ, because you cannot look at the roads and ignore the issue of NRZ. I mean, they are interlinked. Those two things. The other thing is the issue of when you establish these institutional frameworks, the value system and this and basically the processes that are in place are archaic. I mean, ZINARA might claim that they are doing their job, and that is said, how can ZINARA claim they are being effective when there's a national roads disaster? It's a contradiction in terms, because if ZINARA was working diligently and appropriately, we wouldn't have a national disaster. So they are one of the people that we actually need to blame and look at ZINARA as a key player in actually creating this disaster. The second issue, Andy, that we have to look at is obviously the issue of the politics within the country and the management system that we basically inherited from the colonial system. Nothing major has changed. If I can, Andy, Harare was designed to. Can I carry on, Andy?
Your sound is breaking up a little bit, but we'll see if you can
Hello?
continue. Please continue. Okay, we seem to be having issues there with Vince's sound. We will try and get him back on the line. But while we do that, Lee, let me come to you. Councils throughout the country budgeted for and collected funds or rates from their residents. In the capital city of Harare, the Zimbabwe National Road Administration, ZINARA, has stated, and again I quote, "We as a parastatal have fulfilled our obligations and we have fully dispersed funds to the local authority as per their request." A report from ZINARA indicates that all the major local authorities had received full disbursements as at October the 26th, 2020. Harare City Council, however, blames ZINARA. They point to the removal of the vehicle licensing fees in 2001 as an example. So Lee, let me ask you, in your opinion, what is the real situation? Lee, I think you have to unmute your microphone, please. Lee, can you unmute your microphone, please, sir?
Yes, I do agree. I do agree that the ZINARA has successfully disbursed the funds to the local governments, but it's not just a question of disbursing the funds to local governments, but it is about when these disbursements are done. If you look at the situation in the local authorities is such that we go for the first quarter and sometimes the second quarter of the year without receiving any disbursement from the ZINARA. And it's in an issue that we have raised with the new CEO of the ZINARA, and he has promised that they will improve on their effectiveness in terms of delivery. So that as it may, we've rightly pointed out that, for example, Bulawayo and Harare, they received by October, that will be the end of the year. But if you look at most of the road maintenance, periodic maintenance of can I go on? Can I proceed?
Please proceed. Please proceed, Lee.
Okay. Now I was saying, when you look at the road maintenance, periodic maintenance of roads comes in the first quarter of the year, like right now when there is so much rain and so on. So we would expect that ZINARA would be able to disburse funds timely so that the local authorities are able to carry out their road maintenance works. But we're coming to the situation that we are in the state of disaster. It has been necessitated by the heavy rains, and it is something that we did not foresee either as ZINARA or also as as local authorities. However, we assume that as local authorities, so we take also part of the blame in terms of having our planning in place so that we do not wait for the current year budget to finance the road maintenance activities. We should have a plan that would also ensure that we deal with our roads towards the end of the year. Like when we receive money towards the end of the year, like the case of Harare and Bulawayo that you have mentioned, when we receive money in the October period, it should prepare us for the coming year.
I want to move to Frederick. You're right. I mean, money gets dispersed quickly and should be used immediately to look at the infrastructure. I think that's a good comment, Lee. Frederick, you know, you can comment on what Lee said, but I also want to ask you this because you obviously represent ZUDAC, of which your members obviously are driving on the roads, the drivers and conductors. And one question, of course, is can you estimate how much motorists or even your own members on average are incurring in repair costs due to the bad road infrastructure? Because obviously there's suspension, there's tire bursts and tire breakdowns. I mean, it can become quite expensive to drive on the streets of Harare.
Thank you very much. To be honest, I want to start with the employees themselves, the drivers. They are not receiving their salaries as a result of the fact that whenever a tire is damaged, a truck driver is made to pay for it. A bus driver is made to pay for it. Sometimes even other drivers driving other PSV vehicles, they pay for them. But you see our roads, they are all damaged. We don't have actually resting places. We don't have actually wide roads. And as a result of this damage, the roads through potholes and any other state, we have seen in employers failing to actually maintain vehicle roadblocks with unroadworthy vehicles, and actually the fines sometimes are being actually burdened to drivers, but thanks to other employers, they actually take the responsibility. So to be honest, the transport industry has been affected by the state of the roads, because it's not only looking at the cost of fuel, but we are also looking at the cost of the tires, the suspension. So it has actually managed to swipe, if I can not say more than 80% or 90% has been taken by suspension, because we don't have a vehicle when there is no suspension. Remember, when you want to go to the VID for vehicle testing, suspension is the most important aspect that is actually examined by VID inspectors. So you see, it's now coming to affect the welfare of drivers. It's now coming to affect the relationship between the employers and the employees. Because all the time you come from DRC, you see that tires sometimes will come worn out. But I'm talking of Zimbabwe right now. Roads in our rural areas, roads in our other roads linking border. For example, we've got Harare. It is under construction already. We have seen vehicles actually getting through muddy areas, and all these issues are affecting employees, production, and movement of cargo. So it's an issue that has actually affected the whole sector to the extent that most jobs have gone online. Other companies are actually closing. Employers are finding it difficult to run this business because of this.
In fact,
and then commenting on the issue of the disbursement of funds that has been actually raised. Yes, sometimes it can be the disbursement of funds must be expedited, because remember, we are living in an inflationary era where we don't have to delay the disbursement of funds. But again, on these funds, we need an independent management of these funds, because we have seen, for example, Air Zimbabwe is being given more priority, more attention, leaving other pertinent issues.
Frederick, I will be touching on later in the show about the funds, but I want to bring Vince here, because you did mention something, Frederick, which was important. Because at one point, Vince, haulage trucks en route to South Africa started actually to circumvent Zimbabwe due to our poor road network, leading to losses in transit fees and other economic benefits. In your opinion, how much business do you think Zimbabwe actually lost or is losing?
Well, I have looked at that, but I'm not sure of exactly the percentage. That to me, that has been one thing obviously that has contributed to to the abuse and the overuse of our roads. You see, Andy, my problem is that we seem to be focusing on the symptoms, and we're not really discussing the root cause of why we are where we are. And if we are being honest with ourselves, Andy, it's because we are not planning well. We have a government that has got an economic planning division, but we are not planning ahead, so that we are in a crisis management mode all the time. And when you're in a crisis management mode, you have to go and look for money, and you're talking disbursements become a major issue.
In fact, Vince, that takes me to my next question. Vince, sorry to stop you there, but it does take me to my next question. I mean, you mentioned earlier about the issue that the $34 billion in the African Development Bank report 2019 that needs to be spent on our infrastructure. Also, there was a 2011 World Bank infrastructure report titled Zimbabwe's Infrastructure, A Continental Perspective, that stated that Zimbabwe needs about a billion annually of public and $500 million of private funds annually just to meet some of the pressing infrastructure needs. So, of course, the question then comes in is, where do you believe that Zimbabwe will be able to find enough resources to be able to fix the national disaster that is our roads as declared by the government?
Yes, yeah. Infrastructure, Andy, as you know, infrastructure is a very long-term investment. And if you look particularly at roads, the issue of attracting the private sector is key. One of the issues that has been mentioned, for example, in order to raise the money, is to do more PPPs, private sector, public sector partnerships. But that then takes you into the whole lot of issues regarding the investment climate, confidence that people can actually come and invest billions of dollars in Zimbabwe over a 30-year period. And let me give you an example. We were trying to fix NRZ, remember, and we had a rehabilitation program for NRZ, which hasn't gone because that has got a serious impact on the cost of repairing of our roads. And that deal was cut our transport. It's a pity he's not here. So these cannot encourage outside investors to come and partner with the government. It is clear there is no way that this government can fund it. You need development partners, but development partners are not going to come running to Zimbabwe because they've got their own conditions, particularly on.
Okay, we seem to be having again some sound issues there. But anyway, you're watching our virtual discussion this afternoon. ZIMCODD Public Finance Management Reform in Daba. National roads declared a national disaster. Where is the money to fix them? This broadcast is brought to you by ZimPaper's TV network ZTN and our partners, the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, ZIMCODD. Now, as I said at the top of the program, we had invited the Minister of Transport and Infrastructure Development, Honorable Felix Mona, to participate on the program. Unfortunately, he had to send us his apologies. Lee, let me come to you. Zimbabwe's cabinet met yesterday and approved an emergency road rehabilitation program and have budgeted $400 million to finance corrective, preventive and restoration works over the next 36 months. It was further announced yesterday that the District Development Fund has set aside $238 million for works in various provinces. So can I ask you, do you have any idea how and from where the government is going to raise the required funds for these vital projects? Lee?
Well, like you said, I suppose where the government is going to get these funds, I think that would be a question for maybe for the Minister of Finance. But however, I would give my own opinion, a personal opinion, that government faced with such a disaster, they have in the past been able to stand to also to the occasion and be able to actually come up with the ideas and also come up with the frameworks that would finance such disasters, like the budget that was announced. I suppose that the Minister of Finance is looking at that and coming up with financing mechanisms that would ensure that the disaster is
let me come back to you, Vince, then. Vince, let me quickly come back to Vince on that, Lee, if you don't mind. Vince, the cabinet briefing yesterday, it was announced $80 million for emergency roadworks covering 60 days, $120 million for preventive works spanning 6 months, $120 million for rehabilitation and reconstruction spanning 6 to 18 months, and $80 million for other related works spanning 18 to 36 months. This was announced by the cabinet yesterday. So, Vince, let me just ask you briefly, where do you think Zimbabwe will get the money from? Where will the government be able to raise this money, or is it already there? Do they have the money already in place? Vince?
Well, difficult to answer, as you would know, because there's so much opaque. That's exactly how he's going to raise that money. I would suggest that, number one, they're going to borrow, which is the normal procedure that they go. Obviously, the obvious route where they can actually access the money, because nobody's actually bringing in this kind of money. The other thing, Andy, what you are talking about, the amount you're talking about are peanuts. Looking at the fact that we need 34 billion and we are only spending 1 billion per annum. If we make a calculation, Andy, it means that for the next 34 years, we're going to be spending $1 billion a year in order to get to 34 billion, in order to get our infrastructure correct. So even this fixing things bit by bit doesn't help, because when you come to infrastructure, by the time you fix something has broken down. So what is really required, Andy, is a big bang approach where we say, listen, we need 34 billion. What are the requirements for us in order to actually raise that? Economic or political? We need leadership. that actually creates the urgency, because this national disaster ending is not only in roads, it's in water management, it's in housing, it's in agriculture. Every sector in Zimbabwe is basically a disaster as far as I'm concerned, simply because, number one, we failed to plan. We've got this syndrome that I call build, neglect, and rebuild. It seems to be an African sense, and then you rebuild at a huge cost. If you look at the roads ending, if you look at the roads ending, they should have been repaired 30 years ago.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the infrastructure, I mean, one of the criticisms, of course, is that money has not been spent on road infrastructure for many years, both by councils and government. But, Frederick, I want to bring you in here. You know, Zimbabwe may need to raise some of the money to repair the road infrastructure from domestic resources. And it's interesting because one commentator put it in place and he said, would your members or would the motoring public consider or support a special tax or fund to be set up to assist in this endeavor? What would be your comments to that?
Thank you very much. We don't start by actually borrowing from outside as Zimbabweans who want to see our country developing. I believe that given the opportunity to operate with the recognition, given the opportunity to operate through bylaws that actually put discipline, and actually through coherent systems where we sit down together and evaluate the taxes to be paid by the transporters, evaluate everything that needs to be done for them, then we agree. I tell you, transport operators can be ready. Why? Because we would have actually addressed the issue of unnecessary costs. I start by saying, how many combis do we have? We had more than 60,000 combis in Zimbabwe. And already they were actually contributing through fuel, contributing through toll gates, contributing through acquiring taxes. And all this revenue is already dead. So I'm just advising our Minister of Finance and the government, and even the Minister of Transport, to take into consideration the coming back of private operators to actually start operating in an organized manner, not to just abandon them. Yes, it has been because of COVID, but we hope that bringing them means that we're going to raise a lot of money. Tax will be collected. We have been paying presumptive tax, but it was not actually monitored. But you are going to see a situation where organizations that are registered to the government monitor the accountability of compliance of their members. We're going to see money being raised from our sector. Then we will cross to other areas. For example, we do have mining, we do have agriculture. I think we are all known that we are all known for mining and agriculture. We must set aside a percentage from the mining industry or mining companies for road rehabilitation. Remember, we are talking about a state of disaster. There is no any economy that can move without roads. There is no any economy that can move without smooth flow of cargo. We have been actually talking about the closure of the Zambian Livingstone border. It's because of the roads. So it's a matter of putting our ideas together, forget about politics. We don't need to mix politics with all these things. We have got people who have died during the liberation struggle, but the number have been surpassed by road carnage. We've got people who are living, who have died as a result of HIV and other chronic illnesses, but the number have been surpassed by.
Yeah, you know, Lee, I want to bring something to your attention and to see your comment on, because it's something that critics have stated, and in fact I think it's true, anyone who's been driving around, particularly in capital cities, is that when repairs have been made in the past to Zimbabwe's roads, the repair work appears not to be durable. In fact, it is common to see the same roads being repaired over and over again. So I suppose the question is, what standards apply? What material is recommended? What is your comment?
Okay, it's a matter of actually. This is
Frederick. Sorry, excuse me, Frederick. Frederick, this is for Lee. Sorry, apologies. This is for Lee. Lee, did you hear the question?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I got the question. Yes, indeed, the problem of substandard repairs has been well documented in some cases. But however, we urge, like in our association, that it is important that we have standards that are really are acceptable, because we are at the moment, right? If you look at some of the roads now that are being repaired at the moment, they are really up to standard. But in the past, I really agree with you that some kind of repair jobs were not done properly. But then all this comes to an issue of us. All this comes to us having a proper framework in terms of how we should have the issue of road maintenance done. In terms of we agree on certain standards. We have to we have to stick to those standards, and as such, I think we'll go forward that way. But if you look at most of the roads that are being repaired at the moment in the urban areas and also even on our national highways, they are of very good standard.
So, Vince, you know, you mentioned earlier about initiatives such as the public-private partnerships or build, operate, and transfer that could be considered in terms of partnerships in terms of road rehabilitation. But the question is what can we offer investors that is attractive for them to come and invest in the road infrastructure sector, or at least the transport sector in general, Vince?
Well, and you would know that this economy is operating well below its capacity, given in all. But we are 30 years behind on our infrastructure, if not more. So that creates a significant upside if we were to modernize that infrastructure to actually invest in that area. But Andy, I have had experience with the PPP and BOT, and nobody, particularly at council level, knows what is involved. I mean, it is not clear on who is responsible for actually signing PPPs and what is their structure. And that is one problem that investors face, that you might be keen to actually come into the country and invest, but when you come in, you meet all the red tape and people who basically don't know what they are all about. So people, number one, you have to sort out the institutional architecture so that it's easy for investors to actually come. Humongous if we are serious about actually dealing with this problem. I see my colleagues have actually indicated some major issues, and the one issue we haven't actually talked about, which is very key, is the issue of the overcrowding issue in urban areas. We've got so much traffic in the urban areas that even if we fix the road, actually leading to serious deterioration, and that even if you repair the infrastructure, you have that particular problem. So the issue of spacing new cities and new urban so that we can expand away from CBD towards, you know, outside peri-urban and create new towns and new cities there. Significant impact on the quality of roads, of urban roads. The other thing, Andy, which is very important, which is what is of the 91,000 kilometers of road, 93% of our roads are considered poor. So, you know, it's a huge thing. This is not to be taken easily by spending 100 million or 200 million there. It's a systemic issue, a systemic problem. We've got a implementation problem. We've got a political problem. And until we resolve those, we are not going to, you know, attract the 30 billions or the 40 billions that we're talking about. So we will continue to fix things piece by piece, you know, without a significant rehabilitation or a total revamping of our road infrastructure.
All right, you're watching our virtual discussion this afternoon. ZIMCODD Public Finance Management Reform in Daba. National roads declared a national disaster. Where is the money to fix them? This broadcast is brought to you by ZimPaper's TV network ZTN and our partners, the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, ZIMCODD. You know, Frederick, you know, I'd like you to answer this briefly if you can, but what are the human development and informal sector needs in public transport? To what extent are these prioritized? And how can citizen and the informal sector participation in public transport be enhanced?
Yeah, there is a need for the public to understand how the transport system goes. It's a matter of actually engaging the residents' associations. It starts with information dissemination. We sometimes meet the residents in different cities. We have seen that our public, they are not aware of how these being managed. They are not aware of how these actually funds are being dispersed and for what. So we are saying there is a need for a stakeholder approach where we see the public participating through their councillors, through their MPs, but sometimes they may not be able to actually articulate accordingly to what the public have demanded. Sometimes we want meeting them in numbers, by meeting them even through technological platforms, because they need to participate, because at the end of the day, they are at the receiving end of the negative or the positive. So we have to see much coming from the public.
Right. Lee, public finance management entails the existence of both a social contract and democratic safeguards against the abuse of public resources. Frequent cases of the corrupt handling of road funding has, I believe, eroded public trust in ZINARA and local authorities. So what is being done to eliminate corruption and mismanagement to ensure that funds meant for road rehabilitation and construction are spent on exactly that? Lee?
Well, thanks, Ed. As far as I'm concerned, there is a finance management control in place to make sure that the funds that are meant for roads go specifically to roads. For example, the framework that is in place is such that local authorities, when they get funds from ZINARA, the funds go directly to the contractor who is doing the work. So that is a form of control that is in place. And I really believe that something can be done to improve on that, since that situation alone also has its own problems in as far as the disbursement of funds is concerned. But there is a Finance Management Act in place to govern financial public but financial finances in local authorities and other public entities.
Vince, devolution of power and authority to local authorities, commentators believe, could be part of the solution towards improving public transportation in Zimbabwe. The management and distribution of funding for roads is effectively centralized at the moment through ZINARA. Is this approach working? Do you believe that local and provincial councils have the capacity to manage road projects effectively, free of abuse and corrupt practices? What advice would you give?
Yeah, okay, we still have a long way to go, Andy, when it comes to devolutions, particularly the capacity and competence and skills at low level, and in particularly they.
Yeah, we appear to be having some problems with your sound, Vince. I'll give you one more try to answer the question, but maybe you could try again, please.
Okay, I'm saying devolution is important. Devolution can work. What is important, Andy, is that we must, so that we are actually able to build roads at provincial level. We seem to be rushing devolve before building that capacity, and unless we build that institutional capacity, we are continually going to get issues where money is misspent or money goes missing, or we have poor quality roads. So we are putting the cart before the horse. I think if we don't build capacity at provincial level first, before we undertake a significant infrastructure rehabilitation program.
Frederick, this issue of corrupt practices, abuse of funds, particularly when it comes to road construction and rehabilitation, is very topical, and I think there have been alleged reports in most of the media over the years concerning this. So my question to you is, what advice would you give the government to ensure that this new national disaster pronouncement concerning Zimbabwe's national roads is successful? What, in your opinion, do they need to do?
What they need to do, number one, is to start with an education and awareness stage. has to contribute, number one. Number two, the setting up of an independent body that is registered with the government. And in this body will actually consist of all relevant stakeholders. That way, we are going to see a body that is going to actually give a nod after the construction of every road. They qualitate the road. It's a body that is actually going to see the management of the funds, prioritization and of the funds to key areas. For example, we have got the roads that lead to health institutions. We have got roads that link business. We have got the roads that link to schools. We have got the roads that link even actually prioritizing, sitting down, map the way forward, not just rushing to look for money, but actually first have a plan to make sure that we have it in place. Like what I said before, we had more attention being given to air travel, yet we do have road travel that touches more than 90% or everyone is using the road. We have seen maybe few aeroplanes at the Air Zimbabwe, but they get more attention. We are saying it's a matter of actually declaring where most Zimbabweans use the consumption of this money must be actually directed to the roads, because so it's about eliminating corruption. It's about actually eliminating an issue of bureaucracy, the tendering procedure. All these issues have to be dealt with, because we have seen a lot happening. It's a matter of actual.
Right, Lee, my final question to you, and this is actually, Vince raised this earlier, in conjunction with substantial road infrastructure repair and rehabilitation, would you also advocate for rehabilitation and repair of Zimbabwe's rail infrastructure to connect all the major towns, cities, and possibly even urban suburbs to ease the congestions on the country's roads as we speak? Because that's one area that we believe that you could remove. If you remove congestion from the roads, it will also reduce wear and tear on the infrastructure. Your comment?
True. We would really advocate for that. Look at the cargo that is being rolled on our roads, particularly the national highways, is damaging the roads tremendously. And I think by having a functional railway system, railway infrastructure, it will actually ease that pressure on the highways. And also in the urban areas, we will also see an ease in terms of the movement of commuters. For instance, if you look at the commuter trains, that's the way to go everywhere. It's happening in other parts of the world, and even in Africa, we are moving towards that, because my colleague Frederick was talking about, there is a lot of congestion in terms of urban transportation. And as such, by having a functional railway infrastructure, it will go a long way in terms of making sure that our roads are saved and they will live a longer life. Because at the moment, our roads, they cannot stand the pressure that it is there. But when you look at the 12% of the roads that I mentioned in the urban areas alone, you realize that in terms of the density of transport, of traffic in those roads, it is so huge that the roads cannot actually sustain that amount of traffic pressure.
To end our show, end of our show today, you have been watching ZIMCODD Public Finance Management Reform in Daba. National roads declared a national disaster. Where is the money to fix them? This broadcast is brought to you by ZimPaper's TV network, ZTN, and our partners, the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, ZIMCODD. I would like to thank my guests this afternoon. Lee Mutekede, he's Secretary General, Urban Councils Association of Zimbabwe and Zimbabwe Local Government Association. Frederick Maguraminga, he's Zimbabwe Union of Drivers and Conductors, ZUDAC President, and Vince Musewe, an independent economist. We had invited, of course, the Minister of Transport and Infrastructure Development, Honorable Felix Mona, but he unfortunately was able to make it. Gentlemen, thank you so much for appearing on the ZIMCODD show this afternoon. A final comment. Zimbabweans have complained for too many years to count about the state of the country's roads. Jokes abound about the size of potholes and that most of the urban roads in the country resemble dirt tracks and those in rural areas are impassable, especially during the rainy season. But jokes aside, these are just the sad facts, the reality of Zimbabwe's dilapidated countrywide road network. Even roads in the heart of the Zimbabwe cities are not spared. Potholes abound wherever you drive. The question, of course, is why? How did it come to this? Why did Zimbabwe's government have to take the drastic step of declaring Zimbabwe's national roads a national disaster, something that most would not associate with roads? It is time that we learn from our past mistakes. We must ensure funding for roads is spent with accountability, transparency, and free of corruption under a comprehensive roads policy with clear deliverables and success factors. We must never forget that road infrastructure is vital to Zimbabwe's economy, and without it, our path to economic prosperity may be just that much harder. I'm Andy Hodges. Goodbye, and you all be safe.